Most people see the job title, they see the head of, they see the lead, but they never really understand the internal landscape that the person is navigating outside their 9 to 5. So today I'm sat down with Ash Nixon. Ash works at a local homelessness charity, but her office is more of a complex place. She's navigating the sensory world of AuDHD, the echoes of complex PTSD, and the unpredictable brain fog of perimenopause, which is always a mouthful to say. So how you hold the space for the most vulnerable in a society when you have your own internal world, when it feels like it's shifting under your feet. We're talking about that invisible load. Grab a cuppa. This is Ash's story. Hi, Ash. How you doing?
I'm good, Dan. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. There's a lot of words involved there, a lot of things that are going involved. So we'll be deep diving into lots of things. As we said before we press play, everything's off the table. We can talk deep dive as much as you feel comfortable. And it's very important, isn't it? The things that we're going to cover today. What made you say yes to speaking with me today?
Well, I thought it was an interesting proposal when we talked about the podcast. And I love the fact that you're giving people a voice and a platform. Life is complicated. People are very complex. No two people are the same, but people might have similar struggles in life, especially if there's multiple ingredients in the cake, so to speak. Yes. So I love the fact that, like I said, you're wanting to get, different people on, have a chat, how we navigate our workload and our space and our day-to-day lives. So yeah, I was more than happy to help.
Well, I'm glad you're here because we get to talk. If there's anything we like doing, it's like we like talking. So
exactly, we love an answer.
We do. So, okay, what I want to do, just to kind of like warm us up a little bit, is before we get into that heavy stuff, I want you to tell me about the charity sector. Why the charity sector? What is it that made you go, yes, I found my tribe. I'm here. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I never thought that I would end up working in the charity sector. I feel like, when you're going through your like higher education and, high school, college, whatever, it doesn't really come up. So unless you had like a young inspiration, you wouldn't necessarily be driving towards it from a young age. It's not one of the typical career paths that come out. However, I, from a very young age, actually was so deeply moved by homelessness. Yeah. I remember as a kid being like, coming out Manchester Piccadilly station, and there was lots of people like either in doorways selling the big issue. And I remember being a little kid and I had like 20p. And I think back then the big issue was like 50p and I couldn't afford it. And it just broke my heart because I couldn't help the people that I thought needed help. But then as life went on, through my childhood and into adulthood, there was my own lived experience of homelessness in different forms. And then also lots of things happened in life. And interestingly, as I say, it came up. I decided I wanted a change of career path anyway. I was in the corporate sort of private sector at the time and was very much feeling like a robot crunching numbers. I was in a management position and I'm very empathetic and caring, but the HR and the policies that were in place just didn't allow for any humanness. Yeah. Whether that was in the shape or form of like disabilities, mental health, being a single parent and what flexibility you might need and things. It just felt like a wrong fit. Yeah, and I was really fortunate that a temp job came up for a charity, for a homeless charity. And again, I was really familiar with who they were because of like that childhood connection and the Christmas donations I used to make, like most people do. They think of homelessness at Christmas and make a donation. Yeah. So I was familiar with them, took on the temp job, and yeah, it's just excelled from there. The biggest thing that I noticed very, very quickly was the contrast in worlds from sort of, like I said, private sector to charity sector. And what you realize is that these people want to help other people. They care, they're compassionate, they're empathetic. They, want to make a positive impact in the world. And they're so used to dealing with people with complexities that there was no judgment, there was no looking down or there was no stigma about mental health or all the other things that I'd experienced in my career up to that point. It didn't exist in the charity sector because it was kind of the point, that we're helping people. And people, like I said, are complicated. So immediately felt like I could finally be myself, finally be open and honest, and had such good support in place at the time and kindness all around me, that place of work became one of my safe spaces, which was something I'd never, ever had before.
Yeah, no, definitely. And obviously working in the charity sector, you are always giving and you're always providing, especially with the homelessness sector as well. What are you doing then to protect your own cup and fill your own cup? Because you're spending your time filling up everybody else's.
It's two-pronged really, because on one half, my lived experience means that I can relate and I can understand deeply what a lot of the people I'm helping support are going through or have been through. So you've got that shared sort of empathy. On the other hand, I have had the odd experience where certain people or certain topics have triggered me. For example, one thing that I found is when I've done safeguard training in the past, which is necessary, but sometimes some of the subjects that come up in that can be directly related to some of my own lived experience, and I found it overwhelming and upsetting, or topics around domestic violence or suicide. So when I've been caught off guard, I've been quite triggered and quite upset and overwhelmed by some of that. But then what I've learned about myself is, as long as I am prepared to walk into that room, that subject, that topic, it's fine. I can take a few breaths, I can compose myself, and I can feel strong and push through. I think it's more when I've been unprepared and caught off guard. So looking after myself, like I said, it is trying to be forewarned when I'm walking into a space, who I might be presented with, maybe any risks that might be involved. And then just making sure as well that I am taking care of myself outside of work. And it's learning what is it that actually is good for you. So for me, sometimes it's coming home from a working day when the weather allows, going straight into the garden and having half an hour to an hour just in nature, in calm, in my safe space, being with my pets, and just decompressing from the work day. And then when I step back into my house, it's gone then, and I'm in my safe zone and I don't think about some of the things. You do have to get a bit of a thick skin, because while you've got empathy and you want to help, sometimes you can recognize that the system is a bit broken, and sometimes there isn't always a solution, or there isn't always the answer. And you can't help in the way that you want to help, or sometimes you have to step back and make sure you're not getting too personally involved and keep some professional boundaries in place. So just lots of training, lots of knowledge, support from your colleagues, and just learning as you go as well about yourself.
Yeah, no, that's true. And it's clear from what you're saying that you've got a lot of heart in what you do. You wouldn't do it if you didn't have heart. And that's the reason for being basically, isn't it? So there's obviously that layer to your professional life that people don't always see. And we're talking about those layers, some of them that we mentioned at the start, of AuDHD and CPTSD, isn't it? So for those who don't know, AuDHD is a mixture or a hybrid, however you want to look at it, of autism and ADHD. When somebody is autistic, it's very likely that they have something else that adds on to those layers, just makes you that extra interesting. And it can feel quite, especially with AuDHD, can feel like a unique internal tug of war. I mean, I'm no therapist, but just from my understanding, it's a battle between the two.
It's amazing,
between your routine and that kind of needing that novelty. So
and the impulsivity.
Yes. And so how does it actually manifest if you're a bit busy?
To be honest, so for many years, I'd noticed traits about myself, and it was my lack of understanding at first that made me struggle, because I didn't know that you could be a combination of both. I genuinely, when I was younger, thought that it was like a spectrum, and that autism one end and ADHD was the other end, because they're so conflicting in their traits in a lot of ways. So how could they be anywhere near the same? How could you be both? So although I identified, I felt like, how can I sit in either camp? Because I'm not all of that, and I'm certainly not all of that.
Make
So
your
it
own.
wasn't actually until working in this sector and getting lots of training about how we support clients with neurodiversity and other things that it was like, I actually learned that, I mean, AuDHD isn't an official name for a diagnosis, but it's been tagged as when somebody is diagnosed with both. And it is absolutely that knowledge and understanding that you are not a stereotypical autistic person, if there is such a thing, but you're not standard of what people learn and understand typically about either. You have got conflicting traits. Perfect what you just said. I absolutely need routine for safety and stability in my life. But also I'm extremely impulsive and I act quickly and I get things done and I need to do it now to satisfy that itch inside of me. So
Yes. Yeah.
It's very conflicting and stressful at times, but then also, like you said, because it's like a hybrid, it's absolutely taken both superpowers. You can actually think, well, I've got that and I've got that and I can do this and I'm brilliant. You know, I can say that I am sociable. I can make friends.
Yeah.
I am chatty, probably too chatty.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah.
I can use these things to my advantage in my work. But at the same time, for exactly the same reasons, they are actually a negative for me in my work as well. But every light, there's a dark.
Yeah.
So it's almost like using the same argument for either side sometimes. So yeah, it's very conflicting.
And I guess I'm glad you said that it was a superpower, because that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. Like, just because somebody's got a term or a label doesn't actually mean that that's them. They're doomed now. That's them. Put them over there, and then we'll focus on the neurotypical. No, it is a superpower. You can think and do things slightly differently, and it gets us out of that groupthink mentality. So my question was going to be, is it a superpower or a struggle? But you've answered that there anyway, to kind of say it is a superpower, even though internally you can still probably struggle with that.
It's also like, what I don't know, and I'm not speaking on behalf of everyone in the world, but I don't think a lot of people realize it is a different brain wire. Your brain is very different. It's not a disability. It's not a minus. I like to explain it as, many years ago, when people looked at being left-handed as like, ooh, strange and different. And everything was pretty much created for right-handed people, the scissors, the pens, everything we do. But being left-handed isn't a disability. It's just that the world created everything for right-handed people. So left-handed people have to figure out how they fit into it. And that's what I think a lot of neurodivergents feel like, is that it's not a minus necessarily. It's just when they're trying to apply themselves in this neurotypical world that's been created, it's about, how do I manage that, and how do I fit in, and how do I flex? So even that itself is a superpower, because being so adaptable and flexible just to get through a normal day is a superpower in itself.
Yeah. Looking at it beyond being a label, it's about, okay, because you think that way, how can you do something in greater detail? Or how can you do this? You might lack in that area, but everybody lacks and has pros and cons.
Yeah, who's fully perfect in everything? Nobody.
Exactly. I was going to say myself, but that's not entirely true either. So. But obviously the AuDHD, and then we mentioned at the start the CPTSD, and that often means that your nervous system is always on high alert as well. So you've got the AuDHD, that's having conflict, and then you've got the CPTSD as well, also having its own internal conflict on your nervous system. So how do you create that safe space for yourself, especially at work as well?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you've got to have a safe space that exists in the world. And for me, fortunately, it's my home now, my house. I bought this house 2 years ago, and that's the first time that I've had an actual safe space, a secure place to call home, and that's mine. So I'm so fortunate that I have that. So it might not necessarily be the place that you live that is your safe space. It might be a park that you go to and you find peace in nature. It might be being with somebody that you love and trust and being nearby to them. So it's finding a literal safe space. And then when it comes to work, that's the hardest part. Because, as I said, until I came to the charity sector, and certainly in my last role, it was the first work safe space I'd ever had. And a lot of that is previously because I masked my mental health. I didn't understand my neurodivergence. I wasn't yet in the perimenopause phase, which we'll come on to later. And the stigma around mental health and the looking around and not seeing anybody else that was like me, and not having management and policies and things in place that allowed you to sort of come out of your shell and be you.
Yeah.
So you might not work in a place that is a safe space, but I suppose you've got to get familiar and comfortable with things like the Disability Act, what other policies they might have in place, if any, around things like flexible working, hybrid working, women's health policies. A lot of these will only exist in a lot more like forward-thinking, nurturing workspaces, but finding out what policies are in place and how they apply to you, and advocating for yourself, making sure that you're having honest, open conversations in your supervision or with another trusted colleague if you have one, and just really like knowing what other tools are out there, looking on forums. For example, things like a wellness action plan can be really helpful to help you understand how you think and work. And then that translates a conversation with your manager, how they can support you, what they can recognize, what exists in the workplace that they can then put into place for you.
Yeah. I like what you're saying about the wellness action plan. When I've worked with clients in the past and they've been like, oh, what do I do with this? And I was like, charities have so many different risk assessments for so many different things, or the wellness plans, that there's so many tools out there that even if you didn't have like a HR department, or you don't feel like you could go to your manager, there's always resources that do exist that people probably aren't even aware of. And let's say go back 2 years ago, 10 years ago, these things didn't exist, but now it's been a topic of conversation for so many people. We need to scream and shout about it a little bit more so people can kind of see that, because the world's so unpredictable. Different people need different things, as we've touched very well there.
And flexibility and adaptability is key both ways, both as you trying to navigate the world and the workspace, but also for employers to actually appreciate the differences in every individual staff member that they have. As I say, my previous role, previous organization was larger and very encompassed all of these different policies. So it really educated me and empowered me and learned, what is out there and what is possible. So when I sort of changed roles, and it was on a smaller scale, I brought these tools with me. My very first sort of sit down was like, here's my wellness action plan. Here's my menopause risk assessment. Here's my workplace adjustment journal.
What was the reaction then when you gave all of that to the manager? Did they just go, I don't know what this is?
I think they knew what they were or had ever seen them before, and was probably quite surprised that I came so thoroughly prepared.
Yeah.
Again, one of my traits. So, and sort of 6 months in, I have instigated a review of said wellness plan, because again, it's a new role, a new working environment. It needs to be constantly reviewed and updated. Also, your health and things change along the way. So I've just recently done a refreshed version. And I'm sort of trying to educate them in what is possible to do within a workplace.
Yeah, of course. And it's those small shifts, just those small conversations, that it's not going to be, it's a marathon, not a sprint, isn't it, with some of these things? Because if people aren't in that mindset, they aren't in that mindset. But as you said, forward thinking companies would love that and probably thrive with that. It's just those small steps, those small education pieces that kind of can help you along with that shift. And it needs to be talked about a lot more, which is...
And even if it's not officially in place as an organisation or a policy, there's no harm in you still using it as a guidance tool to navigate a conversation with your line manager or whoever it might be. As I said just in the beginning, it's knowing what tools are out there, what resources are out there, and it can still just be your guide, whether it's officially provided or officially in place. Doesn't really matter.
Of course. And obviously you went to your new business with these resources. Where did you get them? Where did you hear about all of this?
So as I say, the previous employer already had these things. So actually, rewind to when I was in the private sector in a management role, and I had quite a complex team, actually.
Yeah.
There was no space for that, but through a long process and occupational health and trying to support someone on my team, that's where the first wellness action plan I'd come across was actually me as a manager putting one in place with someone that I supported on the team. Yeah. And it was really helpful. I'd never seen one before. And then, as I said, then in the next organisation, it came up in conversation, and I was familiar with it. So I was like, yeah, this would be a good idea actually to do for myself now. So I was familiar with that. And then, as I say, just because of the size that they had, there was a women's working group, which looked at women's health, and then they had a women's health policy that included the menopause risk assessment. I was part of the disability awareness network that they had, and that was another working group. So things like wellness action plans, the workplace, the adjustment journals and things. That was all stuff I had in my previous, like I said. So I'm just trying to bring it across, even if unofficially, into my new role.
But if it just helps that one person, that's the pat on the back that you don't need, but obviously you receive from that because you've helped that one person along that journey, which is always great.
Exactly.
And you've spoken a lot about, obviously, the women's group. We've been touching upon the perimenopausal, and I want to talk about that. So you've been very open about that.
Yeah.
I'm a male. I'll never go through menopause in my life.
Don't get me started.
I'm not even going to make any joke about menopause, but it's a serious thing, isn't it? Menopause, obviously. A lot.
I mean, the irony, while we're talking, I'm having this hot flush. Totally out of nowhere. I'm sat perfectly still and calm. But that's what happens. So actually, a really interesting piece of work that I did with a clinical psychologist was we sat down and we did a Venn diagram of symptoms of perimenopause, symptoms of trauma, and symptoms of like neurodiversity and how that might present. And it amazed me how much it overlapped. They were almost nearly all in the same categories. So that actually can be quite difficult to unpick sometimes, especially if you're going down the medical route and trying to discuss it with a doctor, like a GP, because again, it's not their specialist subject. They're not in women's health or neurodiverse, perhaps. So they might just identify it as some kind of trauma-related anxiety or depression because it's how it's presenting. There's been a lot of misdiagnoses over the years, especially in women who are neurodiverse, that it's always presented as depression and anxiety, but actually
there's a lot
what happens in a woman's life, and this will peak sometimes with pregnancy or with hormonal period cycles, or at this time, which is the perimenopausal phase. Your hormones are fluctuating all over the place, zigzagging every single day. There's no stability to your hormones in these periods of your life, a woman's life. So actually what it's really done with me, any masking that I'd previously done to cope at work and to fit in and to go under the radar, the mask has been ripped off my face. I feel very exposed and very vulnerable because you simply no longer have that power or ability to hide. Everything is very, very thrust forward in the perimenopause. You're emotionally kind of unstable. You're kind of quick to tears, quick to temper. The brain fog in the workplace is one of the most hindering, embarrassing phases for me until I learned to just own it and make a joke of it and just be honest about it. Because, you could be mid-sentence and you can't recall the name of an item that's in your hands and it doesn't come to you. It drops off the face of a cliff and you just have to move on. So it can be quite hard in a professional space. The hot flushes, they're visible, the turning bright purple, perhaps sweating, night sweats, insomnia, all having a knock-on effect the next day about your focus and your concentration levels. Oh, there's so much I could say on it, but it's very complex. And when you're, as I say, overlapping it with trauma and
Yeah.
neurodiversity, and you try and then say have a conversation in the workplace as well about what support you need, it's almost like trying to understand which area is it coming from, but sometimes you don't know, or sometimes it's all of them. So it is
Yeah.
really hard. You're figuring it out for yourself as you go along. So if you can be confident enough to be open and honest and have these discussions with your line manager,
Yeah.
even if it's up and down and changes and swaps and changes, things like the wellness action plan being reviewed regularly, revisiting things like your workplace adjustments. Is it working for you? Do we need to change it? Do you need to have a caveat in there somewhere? The tool of the menopause risk assessment is downloadable from the official menopause.org website. There's also a symptoms checker tool, which for anyone listening, if you are getting fobbed off by a GP because they don't have enough knowledge and experience in women in their 30s going into perimenopause, and the NICE guidelines only look at women in their 40s and how a GP can help, download the symptom tracker, self-identify whether you think you're in that phase, start making a journal, take all of this evidence to your GP, ask for a referral to a menopause specialist. And then, as I say, with the menopause risk assessment for the workplace, it clearly states all of the symptoms, what the knock-on effect or the problem in the workplace might be caused because of it, and what suggested adjustments could be put in place instead. So all really, really good resources and tools.
Yeah, no, I think that's so powerful to kind of share that as well, because if there is somebody listening along to that and they go, yeah, that Ash is going through the exact same thing as I am. So I need that help, and that help, hopefully it's reaching out to somebody a little bit. So that's brilliant. I remember my first ever interaction with menopause, and I had a client that was an all-female company, and it was just by design. And a few of them were going through menopause together, and they came to me. I was their consultant, and I was a young 20-something male that will never go through it before. And I was like, I don't know what menopause is. I think it's something that my mum went through. But going through that kind of motions and that process, I find quite rewarding as a male, because one, it's something that I can always take with me. It was creating that action plan, conversations that can happen, or something that you could at least very much like a symptom tracker, but not a symptom tracker, you know. And it was always just at least something, a tool that exists, did a policy or a process. If you come to us and say you think you might be going through menopause, here's what we can do to help you as a business. And it was just like so powerful, because it was just like, wow, I'm a man that's helping.
You became an advocate.
Yeah, it became an advocate.
Knowledge, you got some information.
Yeah, and it's not about me being male, never going through it. It's about somebody being that ally to
I had a male colleague in my previous workplace when the perimenopause first started, and it was just about around the time that I was learning to laugh about the brain fog. I couldn't necessarily, it's embarrassing to say, but it's all part of the journey. Sometimes you cry for no reason as well. So, you know, in an open plan office space, that, you know, you can't really hide it sometimes. But I was really fortunate that a male colleague who sat just right next to me said, you know, my mum, my wife, lots of colleagues in his previous workspace had all had really bad symptoms going through this journey. So we felt really comfortable and really familiar and really okay with being by me and offering any support that I might need. And that was lovely to actually have a man, because I'm not going to lie, it can sometimes really put a divider between the male and female species when you're comparing these life-changing journeys, and it can feel very like the balance is unfair, especially when you learn that only 1% of funding goes into women's health research. So you can get very angry at the world and so when you actually have a male advocate, it's brilliant. And the more knowledge and open conversations you can have in the workplace, at home, with any family or friends, children, anyone really that you might come into contact with, it's just, if you can be open and honest, it will help them understand and know better how to support you.
Yeah. And I think it's about somebody going through that motion with you. in terms of having not just that advocate, but then someone learning those life experiences to be like, oh, okay, this is how I just help and support for me to be a better human, but also to just kind of help somebody else, because that's what we're all here for. We're a societal being, aren't we, as humans, without going too philosophical, but we're just there to look after each other. And hopefully this can resonate with somebody, your story. And that's why
I hope so. Like, there's lots of layers there, so
lots of layers, lots of ground that we've covered today, but I want to make sure that we're finishing on a high. Okay, so what's one thing that our listeners could potentially do or take away from your experience or your journey? What's that one thing that they could probably do better this week or support other people?
Stand up for yourself, and don't give in. Don't give in and don't give up, no matter how hard the challenge feels, whether it's advocating at the GPs, whether it's in the workspace and the work environment. Don't give up, because sometimes you feel weak and you feel tired and you constantly get a negative answer or result, but keep pushing through, keep trying, and I promise you will get a positive no matter how long it takes.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant place to start. Obviously, I want to thank you for everything that you've shared and said today. There's no way that we can fit everything into half an hour, but we've tried obviously our best. It's conversations like this that obviously help people understand people in a better light. And you're probably one of the best advocates I've ever spoken to about this, because you're just raw and honest, and you just share that just how it is, because sometimes people need to just understand and hear.
That's it. And like you said, there has been too much stigma previously, whether it's been around mental health, whether it's people's, including my own previously, misunderstanding of neurodiversity, but certainly around women's health. As I say, the more open and honest and raw conversations that we have, the better the world will become, because it's all about knowledge and information, isn't it? And understanding. Yeah, definitely. And it can be difficult for some, and I always say this, and it seems quite cliche to say, but it's a difficult conversation for a reason. It's not easy to have. If I don't understand it, or it's not in my wheelhouse, maybe I won't listen to it in detail. But no, we need to have these conversations. So that's brilliant. And just ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask a question if you don't understand. Ask them to explain it to you, because don't make a judgment of what you think they mean or fill in the blank with your own interpretation. Ask. Definitely. Okay, so just before we close it off there, thank you again so much. Where can people find you should they want to reach out and ask questions? So I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the most open forum if people want to connect with me on there. And then they can, whether it's relating to the work that I do or whether it's relating to any of the subjects that we've spoken about today, I'm happy for people to find me, Ash Nixon, on LinkedIn. Brilliant. Okay, so to everyone listening, thanks for pulling up the chair today, wherever you are listening, watching this from. Hopefully it's given you some nice, new, fresh perspective on many different layers, or the invisible load, as we mentioned at the start. So make sure that you subscribe and join us next week when we'll be talking about a different topic. So please, everybody, finish your cuppa, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, Ash.